Picture this. Your entire family decides to throw a beach party in Hawaii instead of showing up to your college graduation. I can still feel that moment when I scanned the auditorium, searching desperately for even one familiar face, only to discover that every single seat I'd reserved for them sat completely empty. When I finally made it back to my dorm, the first thing that greeted me was a feed full of vacation photos. My parents glowing under palm trees, laughing alongside my younger sister Madison, while the biggest milestone of my entire life had been reduced to something they forgot even existed. Perhaps nobody expected that the quiet daughter who always faded into the background would ever find the strength to do something radical, but I did. I changed my name and severed every connection to them. Where are you tuning in from right now? Let me know if you've ever felt like a ghost in your own family. And if this story resonates, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay with me on this journey toward healing. My name is Sophia Bennett. If you've ever been the kind of child who had to figure out how to survive in a household where nobody really looked your way, maybe you'll understand what I'm about to share better than anyone else could. I grew up in the suburbs just north of Seattle, where autumn blankets the streets in copper leaves and winter drags on endlessly without enough daylight. Our household had 4 people: my father, my mother, my younger sister Madison, and me. But even though we lived under the same roof, it never felt like a home where I truly belonged. From the earliest age I can remember, I learned how to take care of myself. I was 5 years old, sitting at the dinner table, trying to tell my mother about my very first day of kindergarten. She barely glanced up before turning to Madison to ask how her ballet class had gone. That pattern repeated itself over and over throughout my entire childhood, as if I was permanently stuck in the passenger seat of my own family's story. Madison is 3 years younger than me, and she became the shining star of the Bennett household. At least, that's what every neighbor and distant relative would say. She had this golden blonde hair, a dazzling smile, and a way of lighting up any room with just a few cheerful words. Meanwhile, I looked plain. I was a decent student, but I never excelled in sports or creative arts the way she did. If there was one thing I mastered, though, it was effort. I worked harder than anyone else in that house, but that effort never seemed to register with anyone. Madison got enrolled in ballet, piano lessons, French tutoring, swimming classes, and weekend trips with friends. I got hand-me-down school uniforms, long bus rides to campus, and every summer I had to work just to afford my own school supplies. During high school, my sense of belonging faded even further. My birthdays were marked by a quick supermarket cake and half-hearted wishes, while Madison's birthday turned into a week-long celebration. Balloons, personalized invitations, and every gift she casually hinted at had already been pre-ordered by my parents. When I became valedictorian, my mother's only comment was, "That's nice, but don't put too much pressure on Madison. She's still young." That kind of difference felt like a shallow cut. No blood, but it ached constantly. I understood early on that if I didn't look after myself, nobody else would. When I left for college, I juggled every kind of part-time work imaginable. I was a barista, a library assistant, even a tutor for middle schoolers struggling with math and English. There was a moment when I asked my mother if she could help cover part of my tuition. Her response was, "We have other priorities. Madison needs her music lessons, her ballet training, and we're saving for her field trips." Every dollar I earned through my own sweat was weighed against my sister's needs, and I was never the one who mattered more. My father was a quiet man who came home from work, read the newspaper, and rarely asked about my studies or my life. Madison's achievements in art competitions or dance performances were always his pride and joy to brag about with friends, while I was just the older one who knew how to look after herself. I don't blame him for it. It just made the loneliness inside me thicker and harder to carry. Once, I saw pictures of my entire family at the beach enjoying a summer holiday without me, because I'd been working a night shift at a cafe to save for the next semester. The feeling of being left behind just kept growing inside me. Back in high school, I once had a little dog named Bailey. After just a few months, my parents said nobody had time to take care of him, so they sent him away to stay with a family friend. That was the first time I cried quietly in my room and made a promise to myself that I'd never let my emotions depend on anyone else again. But making that promise was one thing. Keeping it was another, especially when, no matter how distant things became, I still hoped that one day my parents would finally see me. That hope carried me through all the exhaustion and pain year after year. I believed that if I could just make it to graduation day, every bit of distance would be bridged by a proud smile from my mother, a hug from my father, or a family photo together. That was the simplest dream I ever held, and it was also the only thing that kept me holding on to this family, even after my heart had been broken so many times. I always thought that if I just worked hard enough, someday my family would look at me with pride in their eyes. That feeling stayed with me all through college. Every time I earned a strong grade, I'd screenshot it and send it to the family group chat, hoping for some encouragement, a heart emoji, or at least a simple question from my mother. But the responses were always the same: good job, don't forget to come to Madison's birthday next month. That sadness eventually became my motivation to pour everything I had into my studies, my work, and my independence, so I could be proud of myself even if nobody else ever noticed. By senior year, my college diploma felt like a lighthouse cutting through the night. I knew that if it weren't for scholarships and the money I'd scraped together from countless work shifts, I never would have made it this far. The late nights at the cafe stretched until nearly dawn. Sometimes I'd wipe down tables while cramming microeconomics definitions in my head, my hands smelling of coffee, but my mind focused on memorizing every concept. When my shift ended, I'd rush back to my dorm, quickly wash up, and go straight back to studying, always reminding myself that all these sacrifices were for a single moment of recognition. I started planning my graduation months in advance, handling every tiny detail myself. When the school finally announced the date, I emailed my parents and Madison right away, telling them I'd be receiving my degree on stage and hoping they could come. I even mentioned that I could cover all their travel and accommodation expenses since I'd been saving for it. After sending the invitation, I spent the entire month budgeting every expense, saving every dollar I could. Each week, I cut my spending even further, choosing instant noodles instead of cafeteria meals, just so I could afford a small hotel room near campus and buy round-trip plane tickets for all 3 of them. That wasn't all. I even made a photo album by hand, capturing my whole journey through 4 years of college. I printed the earliest photos from when I first moved into the dorm, pictures of me working at the cafe in my brown uniform, even snapshots of those late nights studying in the library until it closed. I wanted my parents and Madison to see that even without special treatment from the family, I still made it to the finish line on my own. I even planned a family photo shoot on campus where the maple trees would be golden and the June sunlight would mark a new chapter in my life. I imagined us all standing together, me in the middle, diploma in hand, and everyone smiling with pride. However, from the very first days of planning, I started feeling my family's indifference more and more clearly. My mother's replies were always vague. If I'm not busy with meetings, I'll try to make it. Madison just brushed it off. I'm also preparing for my dance showcase, so let me check my schedule. I kept trying to reassure myself that they were just too busy, that as the day got closer, surely everyone would do their best to make time. Every time I checked my email, I anxiously waited for a more definitive response. But all I got was endless silence, In the final weeks before graduation, I clung to that tiny hope that all my efforts wouldn't be wasted. I sent my mother a scanned copy of the invitation, adding a careful note. I really hope the whole family can come. It's the most special day of my life. Whenever I met up with friends and heard them excitedly discuss their family dinners, I just smiled and lied, saying, "My parents are busy, but they'll definitely fly in at the last minute." I even went ahead and made a reservation at a small restaurant for dinner after the ceremony, picking all the dishes our family used to love, even though I was terrified of the scene where I'd be sitting alone at a long table, waiting. Maybe what I wanted most wasn't some big party or expensive gift, but just the presence of my family at that pivotal moment. I wanted to see my mother's eyes shining with pride, to hear my father say he was proud I'd made it all the way. I hoped Madison would hug me, even just once, and say her big sister had done it. All those dreams carried me through so many lonely days, through every time I thought I couldn't go on. I still remember the happiness and excitement when I checked the school website and saw my name on the graduation list, right there in the middle of hundreds of students with the words "Honors Student, Full Scholarship." I burst into tears right then, feeling as if every effort, every late night, every extra shift had finally paid off. I took a screenshot and sent it to my mother, hoping to hear just one warm word of congratulations. But my phone stayed silent the entire day, no new messages. Instead, I kept myself busy with graduation preparations. I ordered the freshest, most beautiful flowers from a shop near campus, wrapping them myself to give to my mother and Madison if they showed up. I scheduled a same-day photo shoot, hoping to capture the first family picture of all four of us after so many years. Every detail, every expense was carefully listed to make sure nothing was missing. In my heart, graduation was a small celebration I was planning on my own, but it was still full of hope that maybe, just maybe, I wouldn't have to celebrate alone. The closer it got to the big day, the more clearly I felt loneliness creeping in between my own enthusiasm. But I refused to let myself give up. I wouldn't let myself collapse in the face of their indifference. I believed that if I was persistent and worked hard enough, one day all the good things would come to me. Deep down, I still clung to a fragile hope, a hope that even if it was late, even at the very last minute, my family would show up, wrap me in a tight hug, and give me the recognition I'd longed for my whole youth. That morning, I woke up early, so nervous I could barely eat breakfast. The June sunlight streamed through my small window, carrying the scent of freshly cut grass, mixed with hope and vague anxiety. I wore the dress my mother once said looked good on me back in freshman year, tied my hair neatly the way she always liked, and clasped the silver necklace my father had given me long ago around my neck. Every little detail was my final effort to make today as perfect as possible. Deep down, I still clung to the thought, maybe they'll show up at the last minute. Maybe they'll hug me tight like in the movies I've watched. Just among the bustling crowd on campus, friends were calling out for their loved ones. Parents were beaming with cameras in hand. Sisters were exchanging fresh bouquets and tearful hugs. The air was thick with happiness, pride, and the hope of being seen. I tried to look around, searching for familiar faces in the crowd. Maybe they'd be late. Maybe they'd just arrived and were looking for their seats. I kept telling myself that, even though a part of me knew I was only lying to myself. When the loudspeaker came on, each student was called up on stage to receive their diploma. Every time a friend passed by me, I heard cheers and shouts from the stands. Some of my friends got tight hugs, bursts of applause, and happy family photos. Then came my turn. Sophia Bennett echoed across the auditorium. I walked up onto the stage, hands trembling with emotion, eyes darting quickly over to the seats I'd reserved, bought tickets for, and so carefully arranged for the three people I loved most. But all I saw was a row of empty chairs, a silent gap. Nobody waving, no familiar eyes encouraging me. I took my diploma, forcing myself to smile like someone who'd just achieved something great. But inside, I felt like a supporting character in my own story. After the ceremony, everyone gathered in little groups to take photos, celebrate, and head off to private parties. I stood on the sidelines, the bouquet meant for my mother and Madison still tucked away in my bag. I checked my phone, hoping for an apologetic message, some notice that they were on their way or had run into trouble. Instead, all I received was a short text from my mother. No explanation, no hint of regret, just the same cold words I always got when I needed encouragement. I read it over and over, an indescribable emptiness welling up inside me. I tried calling Madison, but the phone rang and rang with no answer, finally switching over to her voicemail with the background music she loved. I forced myself to smile when a friend ran over and pulled me into a group photo, but loneliness crept through every single moment. Friends asked where my parents were, why I was alone on such a special day. I tried to lie, offering a gentle smile. My parents' flight got delayed. They'll be here for dinner. That answer felt like my last shield, hiding the hurt inside. Everyone offered encouragement, said I was strong, but nobody understood the feeling of realizing that the people closest to you are the ones who never really see you at all. Back in my room, I couldn't bring myself to take off my graduation gown yet, as if I could hold on to some shred of that special feeling before it disappeared completely. I picked up my phone and scrolled through social media out of habit. After just a few minutes, I froze as I saw the latest photos on my mother's profile. My family glowing on a Hawaiian beach, golden sunlight, ocean waves, and endless happy smiles. Madison stood in the center, hair in a high ponytail, white dress fluttering in the wind, hugged tightly by both of my parents. Family enjoying a wonderful vacation with our precious daughter. Love you more than anything. I stared at those photos, desperately searching for any mention of me, even a single line of congratulations from afar. But there was absolutely nothing. In that picture, perfect moment, I was completely erased. The pain turned into humiliation, then into doubt. Was I not good enough? Was I a burden, or just someone extra? That night, I sat alone for hours in the dark, the bouquet still intact, the photo album nobody had looked at lying quietly on my desk. The tears wouldn't stop, mourning a youth full of effort that nobody acknowledged, mourning the last bit of faith in my family as it shattered with every picture they posted. Even the congratulatory messages from friends made me feel even more out of place in this world. All those years of hard work, and all I got in return was a short, blunt message and a social media post that didn't even acknowledge I existed. For the first time, I truly realized how invisible I was to my family, that no matter how hard I tried, I was just a faint shadow on the edge of their story. In that moment, I felt like I was standing outside a window looking in, wishing for once to be at the center of that happiness. But in reality, I was just a nameless passerby. That whole night, I sat alone in my little room, still wearing my graduation outfit, tears streaming down my face, the bouquet I'd bought with my own heart, earned cash wilting in the dark. Out there, my family laughed together while I lived through the biggest day of my life in absolute solitude. Maybe for the first time in my life, I truly understood what it felt like to be excluded, to be left behind by the very people who were supposed to love me most, without even a single word of explanation or promise. After that lonely graduation night, I woke up the next morning with swollen eyes, exhaustion pressing on my chest like a weight I couldn't shake off. Soft sunlight slipped through the curtains, shining on my cramped room with its wilting bouquets and the photo album nobody had bothered to look at. I scrolled through my phone, still finding no messages of concern or explanation from my mother, father, or Madison. Everything seemed meaningless. 3 days after graduation, when the pain had begun hardening into a cold scar, my mother called me. I thought about not picking up, but part of me still hoped for an apology, or at least a hint of real care. On the other end, my mother's voice sounded light, not the least bit apologetic. I just got home. The Hawaii trip was amazing. Madison got some gorgeous photos. Oh, I heard you graduated, right? Congratulations. But you have to understand, the whole family was so exhausted and needed to relax after a long time. Plus, Madison had to prepare for her showcase, so she couldn't miss it. Those words hit me like a bucket of ice water, dousing the last flicker of hope inside me. I tried to hold back, asking, wasn't my graduation important enough for everyone to make time for me? My mother hesitated, then pressed on. You're grown up now. Be independent. Don't let little things affect your feelings. I know you're strong. Madison is at a sensitive stage right now. The family can't please everyone at once. I wanted to argue, wanted to scream that I was just a daughter who wanted to be loved too, but my throat closed up. Her words felt like the final cut to my already shredded pride. That night, I posted a vague status on social media about disappointment, not naming anyone, just a few short lines to let go of what little emotion I had left. Less than an hour later, my phone lit up with messages from my mother and father. Delete that right now. Don't embarrass the family. Nobody out there needs to know our private business. Madison also sent me a voice message, her tone cold. You're being so dramatic. It's just a graduation. Not everyone needs their whole family there clapping for them. I had a showcase, and you didn't see me complaining. I sat on my bed, hands shaking as I played my sister's message again. My whole childhood had been about giving in, about enduring, so Madison could be the priority, so she could grow up in a world painted in her favor. I remembered all the days we studied together, when I was always the one explaining things to her, always the one waiting outside the dance studio until she finished practice so we could go home together. But in return, when I needed the smallest show of support from my sister on the most important day of my life, all I got were cold words of blame. The pain reached its peak when I looked back at my graduation photos. In them, I was forcing a smile, eyes red and swollen, holding the bouquet I'd bought with my own savings. Everyone around me was surrounded by family, while all my effort was reduced to a single lonely picture. Scrolling through social media again, I saw even more new photos from my family. My mother, father, and Madison cutting a cake on the beach in Hawaii. The caption reading, celebrating Madison's city dance competition win. So proud of our golden girl. The post was flooded with comments congratulating them, praising the happiness and closeness of my family. I read each line, feeling as if I'd never existed at all. That evening, I received a long message from my mother reminding me, you're grown up now. You need to learn to be independent, to understand your parents' and your sister's choices. Don't bring this up again. Just focus on your own future. I sat there stunned, any hope of an apology or recognition dissolving instantly. I remembered all those years I'd tried so hard for my family, all the times I'd given way, the long hours at part-time jobs just so I wouldn't trouble anyone. And suddenly, it all felt meaningless. A part of me died when my mother told me I should keep all my feelings to myself so I wouldn't embarrass the family. I realized that all these years, I'd only been the backdrop for Madison to shine, the one who served everyone else's happiness, never once standing at the center of love. Looking at myself in the mirror, I wondered if I'd ever be important enough to be chosen. This betrayal wasn't loud or explosive like in the movies. It was a cold silence, the way my whole family simply chose to ignore me and expected me to accept their absence as something natural. The breaking point of all the disappointment, hurt, and anger was the moment I quietly turned off my phone, deleted every last family photo from my device, and slammed shut every door I once dreamed would open for me. For the first time, I seriously thought about disappearing from their lives, cutting all ties so I'd never have to wait, never have to hurt like this again. In that moment, I realized it was time to leave, not to punish anyone, but to save myself. In the days that followed, I felt like I was falling endlessly into a void where every feeling was tangled between pain, disappointment, and cold emptiness. Seattle drifted into gloomy summer rain, each drop on the window echoing my own silent, bleeding heart. I avoided friends, using job applications as an excuse to lock myself in my little room, the only place where I could be weak without fear of being seen. The diploma hanging over my desk no longer brought pride. It only served as a sad reminder of all the effort that would never be recognized. I was sleepless every night. I would lie still in bed, my mind spinning with unanswerable questions. If only I'd been born into a different family. If only, just once, my parents had put me above their other choices. I would never understand why the people I loved most could so easily forget me, could so easily overlook the most important day of their eldest daughter's life. I kept checking my phone, only to quickly turn it off again, as if I was afraid of receiving yet another cold message. I began cutting all contact, blocking each of their social media accounts, turning off family group notifications, and clearing out anything connected to them from my life. But the pain didn't fade. Instead, it gnawed at me even more fiercely. I kept recalling the years gone by, from the days when I had to teach myself, cook my own meals, and do my own laundry. Every summer I worked at a cafe, my paychecks barely enough for tuition and books, while Madison had entire summers in Europe and got a new bicycle from our parents. I remembered coming home late from work, quietly eating instant noodles under the yellow glow of my desk lamp, while Madison's smiling face looked down at me from the wall, the caption underneath reading, "So proud of our little girl." I wondered if all my sacrifices, all my efforts over the years had meant nothing. I once overheard my father telling relatives, "Sophia's grown. She doesn't need anyone. She's so independent." He was proud of that, never realizing those words only pushed me farther away, made me long all the more to be someone who needs to be loved, even just once. The peak of loneliness came in those sleepless nights, my mind racing. If even the people who brought me into this world don't see my worth, then who am I living for? I always thought I was strong, but everyone has a limit, and I'd finally reached mine. I realized that for years, I'd lived just to one day make my parents and Madison proud of me. A naive, burning desire so powerful that I nearly lost myself. When did I let my feelings become chained to someone else's approval, to the point that even a single indifferent message could bring me to my knees? Some days, I would unlock my phone, read through old messages and photos, then delete them like a ritual to free myself from the past. I unfollowed my whole family online, blocked every old phone number. My parents sent a few more messages, mostly reminders, instructions, or casual questions, but never a single apology. I didn't reply. Madison stayed completely silent. Sometimes I'd see her name pop up on my social media homepage, radiant in new performances, showered in congratulations, as if there had never been a sister named Sophia at all. My friends gradually began to notice that I was different. A few reached out to check in, but I made excuses about being busy and avoided them. I skipped all the graduation farewell parties and group get-togethers. I didn't want anyone to see my weakness, didn't want anyone's pity. I locked myself inside my own shell, a perfectly safe place where my sadness could sink in unnoticed by anyone. Each morning, I felt life slipping by without meaning. I did everything like a machine, no emotion, no purpose. Sometimes I questioned whether I even deserved happiness. I thought about my childhood, all those times I clung to my mother, just hoping for a hug, a simple question. The moments in high school when I wanted to show off my achievements, but got nothing but a distracted glance, the lonely nights in college, missing home, but too afraid to call for fear of being a bother. Now it was all just memories fading like the winter fog in Seattle. One rainy afternoon, as the city shimmered silver, I walked through my old neighborhood, the place I once called home. I stood for a long time under the awning of a familiar cafe, watching strangers pass by and feeling utterly disconnected from the world. I realized that if I didn't let go, I would always be trapped by the past, forever just a shadow on the outskirts of someone else's happiness. That sharp pain, for the first time, gave me a strange sense of relief. No matter how much it hurt, I didn't have to force myself to live up to anyone's expectations anymore. I no longer had to endure the endless cycle of waiting, hoping, and being disappointed. That freedom was both a bitter medicine and the first step toward real relief that I gave myself. I sat in my tiny room, watching the yellow light spill across the old wooden floor, realizing that everything around me now belonged to me alone, no longer connected to anyone else. It was the darkest time in my life, but also the first moment I truly felt that only I could save myself. I slowly learned to accept the truth, to allow myself to be vulnerable, to forgive myself for ever hoping too much. From that day on, I knew that no matter what happened in the future, I would never again be the shadow standing behind my family, never again the person waiting to be loved. Time passed heavily, but it was enough for me to understand one thing. If I kept burying myself in old wounds, I would never really live. One evening in mid-July, when Seattle unexpectedly broke out in sunlight after days of rain, I got a message from Claire, my best friend since high school, the only one who hadn't given up on me even though I'd ignored her encouragement so many times. "Are you free tonight? Please don't say no again. I have somewhere special I want to take you." Claire didn't wait for me to refuse. She just sent the address and meeting time, as if she already knew I needed someone to pull me out of my lonely shell. I almost wanted to come up with an excuse to avoid going, but when I saw Claire's smiling face in her profile picture, I thought, I'll try one more time. Maybe something will change. I put on the simplest clothes, tied my hair back, grabbed a light jacket, and stepped outside. That summer evening, the city was strangely radiant, making me feel small in the crowd. I arrived at the place Claire had picked, a small community center on a corner in Fremont, its warm yellow lights spilling through the windows. Claire was already there, waving and pulling me into a tight hug, as if she wanted to give back a bit of the strength I'd lost for so long. Inside, Claire introduced me to a group of young people whose eyes alone showed they'd been through loss, pain, and struggles of their own. Nobody asked why I was there. Nobody looked at me with pity or curiosity. They just smiled, welcoming me as if I'd always been a part of their group. Claire pulled me closer. "This is the regular meeting of Radiant Hearts, the nonprofit where I volunteer. Everyone here once thought they'd been abandoned by their family, but then realized, as long as you believe in your own worth, there are people out there willing to walk with you, even if you're not related by blood." I looked around and saw a girl with bright red hair sharing her journey of overcoming a violent childhood, a young college student talking about the pain of being rejected by his own parents for not living up to their expectations. These stories flowed on, never embellished or dramatized, just truth spoken to be heard. When it was my turn, Claire gently placed her hand on my shoulder, giving me reassurance. I talked about my graduation day, about feeling lost in a sea of happiness, about years of unseen effort, about a family that always put Madison first while I had to be independent and learn to care for myself. I didn't cry. I spoke with a strange calm, as if all those wounds had lost their sharp edge. The group went silent, and then one young woman smiled gently. "I know that feeling, but you made it this far. You stood up on your own, even when no one was pulling you up. You should be proud of yourself. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like an outsider. I was listened to, accepted, with no need to be perfect or to please anyone. Claire looked at me, her eyes shining. Sophia, you don't have to prove anything to anyone. You've already done it all by yourself. No one has the right to define your worth but you. Those words, so simple, felt like the first rays of light cutting through my darkness. That night, I went home feeling lighter, as if the burden I'd carried for years had been lifted by the quiet recognition of strangers. In the days that followed, I came back to Radiant Hearts again and again. I joined volunteer activities, helping other young people with stories like mine, and realized that when I stopped chasing recognition from my family, I could finally open up to the world outside. I began to see that my value lay in my perseverance, my kindness, and my ability to empathize, not in anyone else's approval. Claire helped me write an application for a part-time position at the organization itself, and when I got the acceptance letter, I cried, not out of sadness, but because for the first time in my life, I truly felt I deserved to be happy. One evening, I sat alone in my room, looking through old photos, not to torture myself, but to truly see the journey I'd made. I realized that for so many years, I'd lived with a name tied to pain, injustice, and expectations that never got fulfilled. I thought long and hard, then decided to write a letter to myself, a person who is free, strong, and no longer living in the shadow of the past. I researched the legal process for changing my name, prepared the documents, and scheduled an appointment at the city registrar's office. Nobody knew except for me and Claire, the friend who'd witnessed every step of my rebirth, the one who held my hand as I signed the papers like a ritual of starting over. That very moment, I felt as if I could breathe for the first time. I was no longer Sophia Bennett, the child left behind, overlooked, forgotten, but Sophia Dawn, someone who chose her own path and her own identity. It wasn't just a new name, but a new beginning. I promised myself I would never again seek validation from anyone, least of all those who once ignored me and acted like my presence was nothing more than a blurry background. And I understood that true healing only begins when you stop waiting for someone else to save you and instead stand up, choose to love yourself, and move forward with a heart no longer afraid. The day I officially became Sophia Dawn, it was drizzling in Seattle, a cold breeze slipping through the window of my small new apartment near the Radiant Hearts office. The name change certificate trembled in my hands, but I felt an inexplicable peace. I was no longer Sophia Bennett. From that moment, everything old and painful was left behind. The only thing I owed myself was to face my family, not to demand recognition, but to return to them everything they'd once ignored, my value, my voice, my boundaries. I posted a short announcement online, the place where for years I was just a shadow in family photos, with Madison always at the center. I have chosen a new name. From today, I am Sophia Dawn. If anyone remembers the girl standing on the sidelines on graduation day, know that she no longer needs the presence of anyone who doesn't cherish her. My mother's message arrived almost instantly. Sophia, what's going on? What are you doing? Then came a stream of missed calls from my father, from Madison, even from relatives who hadn't reached out in years. My mother called, her voice both worried and upset. What do you think you're doing? Changing your name? Cutting off contact with the whole family? Do you know what people will say? I sat up straight, keeping my voice calm. I'm doing what I should have done long ago. Mom, I'm not Sophia Bennett anymore, the kid who was always independent, always left behind. I grew up and got through everything with no one in the family ever asking, no one caring about the most important day of my life. I don't blame anyone, but I won't let myself be treated like a shadow ever again. My father jumped in, his voice heavy. Everyone makes mistakes. You're our daughter. Why are you being so extreme? Everybody gets busy sometimes. You need to understand the pressures adults face. I just smiled, feeling lighter than I ever had. as if all my old resentment had finally melted away. I've been understanding all of you my whole childhood, my whole youth. For the first time, I'm choosing to understand myself. From now on, I'm living for me. I want everyone to respect this decision, whether you agree with it or not. Madison texted me, short and blunt. You're being dramatic. Changing your name doesn't change what family means. For the first time, I didn't get angry. I wasn't hurt. I answered honestly. I don't need you or anyone else to define who I am. I choose to be myself, with everything I've endured and everything I'm going to do in the future. Madison never replied again. In the days that followed, my mother called more often, at first to scold me, then to plead, and finally to offer half-hearted apologies. Sometimes she brought up the years of raising me, the times I was sick, the little expenses she'd covered when I was small. But I was no longer the child who needed that recognition. I reminded her, Mom, thank you for everything you did, but the success and worth I have today are things I built for myself. You can't take credit for that because you never went through the hard times with me. If you really care, please respect my boundaries. I chose a new name to start a new life. Please let me go. There was one time I saw my mother post an old photo of me with a caption, "So proud of my eldest daughter. Successful thanks to being raised in a loving family." That was the last straw. I picked up the phone and called her. This time I didn't cry. I didn't tremble. Mom, please delete that post. My success isn't thanks to your recognition or our family. It's because of everything I had to overcome on my own.